Hello, I'm Henry Keane and we are UATV English. We not only debunk Russian propaganda here with Ukrainian truth for all our global sake, but we do it also with style. In today's episode, victory over common sense celebrated in Russia. Ukrainian frontline within Russia. How are we doing in Kursk? Special tribunal to prosecute Russia's crime of aggression. How, when and what see Ambassador Kurt Volker's comment on the matter. This and more in the episode. Welcome to Wrap Up Weekly. A Victory Day mayhem in Russia, and all week Ukrainian drones have been delivering congratulations to Russia's military infrastructure successfully. Amongst other places, the Basalt plant in the Moscow region is where the congratulation was delivered. It produced weapons and ammunition for Russian army. Explosive celebration was also noticed at the Splav plant in Tula, Russia. It produced multiple launch rocket systems and ammo. In Saransk, after a Ukrainian drone delivered some fireworks to Russia's only plant producing fiber optics, which is critical for combat drones, of course. But the most touching thing for Vladimir Putin probably will be a Ukrainian drone successfully delivered an explosive message right at the Shaikovka and Kubinka military airfields. The first is home to strategic aviation aircraft, the one that launches missiles at Ukraine every day, and the second is home to fighter jets. But how come, right? I mean, what could be the reason behind such a high precision and successful Ukrainian UAV's congratulation rate on Russian military facilities, you might ask? The answer is simple. The Kremlin has pulled all its air defense assets to Moscow or close to it to protect a parade, the parade, a beloved Putin's masquerade, Victory Day. So what if another bunch of Russian fighter jets and soldiers just burn? He is the Tsar. He does what Tsars do, not giving a damn about life of any of his slaves. That is a natural Russian course of things, you see? Even those who stand in Putin's defense personally and are key to the Kremlin's bloodthirsty plans, global, by the way, they all are just expandables, as simple as that. What's to the parade itself? Putin prepared thoroughly, indeed. Amongst other things, he did send invitations to allied countries. In addition to partners of the CSTO alliance and the BRICS bloc, several other leaders were invited. The list initially included almost 30 people. But the thing is, Ukraine announced it is also joining the party, not in person, in a drone way. And after Ukraine announced that it could not guarantee Putin's guests any safety during the parade, some of them catched a sudden cold or broke a leg or changed their plans abruptly any other parade-avoiding way. Because unlike geopolitics, that is all about undercover games and uncertainty, Ukrainian drones are not playing any games and are very, very certain. And so Ukrainian drones convinced one of Putin's worst friends in Europe, Viktor Orban. Comrade Orban decided to get himself a cozy reason not to come to the party. Another puppet of the Kremlin regime, Robert Fico, arrived, though with certain difficulties. But what Putin considers a major success, and who really is an important guest, Xi Jinping of China. He did arrive.
President Xi Jinping pointed out that China and Russia are good neighbors with an unshakable friendship, true friends who share weal and woe, and good partners who achieve mutual success. China's relations have clear historical logic, strong endogenous driving force, and profound civilizational heritage. They are not directed against any third party and are not subject to any third party.
It was easy for some A-class guests, but for some to get bowed to Putin became quite an ordeal indeed. As for B, C, and D-grade guests, like Serbian President Alexander Vučić, his truly heroic, desperate attempts to break through to kiss Red Square's soil are truly amazing, akin to Homer's Odyssey. At first, Comrade Vučić tried to get to Russia through Northern Europe. Well, sounded like a plan back then, until Lithuania just closed its airspace for him. unexpected and irritating, but Comrade Vučić comes from Soviet times and is hardened in battles with those capitalistic buffoons. He tried to fly even further north through my native Latvia. Little did he know, another airspace ban. So Vučić's plane retreated and had to fly all around Eastern Europe right to Azerbaijan, where he was finally given passage. Vučić was still quite lucky, actually. He was not the only one headed to Moscow to deliver a bow to the Russian Tsar. Ukrainian drones, remember? In different parts of the European parts of Russia, airspace was completely closed. Yes, you heard me right. The country that considers itself a major geopolitical power was defenseless these days against those couple of hundred of Ukrainian drones. These drones were so convincing that 150 flights in Russia were cancelled, tens of thousands of people in airports stuck for days. The airports in Moscow and St. Petersburg were completely paralyzed. Well, Russian people's problems are Russian people's problems, not a Tsar's thing, right? So Putin wanted everything to go smoothly at whatever the cost is for the nation. So he announces a ceasefire, so-called 3-day truce, May 8th, 9th and May 10th, including today. Knowing well that the Kremlin dictator's promises are not worth the paper they're written upon, Ukraine braces for the shelling to continue. And we were right, so it happened. Russian terrorists attacked 3 Ukrainian regions with aerial glide bombs and targeted the central parts of the country, Poltava city, with a ballistic missile. The Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky commented on how the Russians keep their word.
Це в їх стилі.
This is their style. For example, these days they are saying that they want some kind of partial ceasefire, but you should know, for example, that the number of attacks these days is the highest in recent months. These days they are reporting more than 200. I had a report from General Syrsky. He told me that yesterday, for example, there were more than 200. I don't trust Russians.
On such a significant occasion for Putin as the Parade Victory Day, Russian propaganda traditionally bursts out with invented stories of the victories of invincible almighty Russian arms. Some are quite nice, actually, well written, well produced, nice suspense, worth Netflix war drama for sure. Some are so no good that it is even awkward. Over the past few weeks, the Kremlin have been spreading a sci-fi story of Ukrainian retreat from the Kursk region, not mentioning, of course, the reason. How come Ukrainians even got into Mother Russia for the first time in 100 years, after all, and got a hold of the whole Kursk region for 9 months in Europe? But now the reality, according not only to General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, but to easily proven by international experts, actually, and even open source prove that. The data is open to everyone. On May 4th, Ukrainian forces successfully target and hit a Russian command center for reconnaissance near Tyotkino. 20 Russian soldiers went KIA. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, confirmed that Russia has been training their drone operators there. Even Russian sources acknowledge that on the night of May 4th, Ukrainian forces intensified drone strikes and artillery fire on Tyotkino before launching an assault on the ground. Doesn't seem much a retreat to me, and not only to me.
Thanks to our active operations in the Kursk region, we have prevented the enemy from launching an offensive campaign in Sumy and Kharkiv oblasts. The buffer zone established by Ukraine's defense forces in the border areas remains effective to this day. Oleksandr Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Ukraine is not only fighting for itself, no, but for all a global sake, believe it or not. Good to know that an overwhelming majority of people around the globe clearly understands that. Let's talk about partners' military and not only aid to Ukraine. First things first, Ukraine will receive another Patriot air defense system. It will arrive from Israel after repairs in the United States. This was reported by the New York Times. Moreover, according to the publication, Western allies are discussing logistics for possible Germany or Greece to send more systems like that to Ukraine. However, the supply of another system, Patriot, from Germany looks quite unlikely, since it has already transferred 3 of its 10 Patriot systems to Ukraine by now. And the replacements for the systems that already been transferred have not yet arrived in Germany. So officials who spoke on condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the matter refused actually to inform us how President Trump feels about the decision in general and in particular about transferring more Patriot complexes to Ukraine. This way or another, it is already happening. And I will cautiously assume that Donald Trump is aware of the fact and would not let it happen if he did not want it to be happening. And while it is also not clear whether these 2 Patriots about to be delivered were negotiated before Trump's inauguration, during Biden's tenure or not, Trump surely has enough power to stop the whole thing if he'd only want that. So, as of today, Ukraine has already received 8 Patriot systems as a military aid. 3 from the United States, 3 from Germany, 1 from Romania, 1 from the Netherlands. However, only 6 of them are operational, while the other 2 are under repairs. The problem is that in order to successfully defend against Russian aggression, Ukraine not only needs to protect its airspace, we also need to hold the front line on the ground. To help us do that, the Czech Republic has transferred 500,000 large-caliber artillery shells to Ukraine since the beginning of the year and does not plan to stop. This was stated by the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, Petr Fiala, at a joint press conference with the President Zelensky in Prague. According to him, the number of artillery shells that the Czech Republic will transfer to Ukraine this year is even greater than in previous years. He also added that the Czech Republic became an intermediary in the supply of 2,000 units of heavy equipment to Ukraine. Among such supplies were 300 tanks, for example. Ukraine and Czech Republic will expand cooperation not only in shell delivery, but also there is in plan to open a joint pilot school.
Ми проговорювали 1,8 мільйонів
We
снарядів.
discussed that 1.8 million shells could be delivered this year, which is a significant amount. Tomorrow we will have a meeting with Czech defense companies. We are still working on the details. Today President Pavel and our representatives at the government and military levels will discuss the next steps in the development of our aviation coalition, namely the creation of a Czech-Ukrainian F-16 school. Obviously, for security reasons, we cannot open such a base in Ukraine at this time. Russian strikes continue every day and therefore we are working with our partners to ensure that such schools can be opened outside Ukraine, and this will happen.
The Ukrainian parliament has ratified the agreement on mineral resources with the United States. I know some say it is an extortion of sorts. Well, those some surely did not even open any article of prominent experts on the matter. It has nothing to do with extortion and has everything to do with being a political tool of influence and a red flag for Russia, actually. Don't believe me all you want, just do yourself a favor. Before having an opinion, learn the subject a bit deeper and closer than hearing about it. First, agreement's content has changed drastically and many times, as the United States and Ukraine saw it differently, very. But in the final version, ownership and control of the subsoil absolutely remains with Ukraine. The fund is created 50-50, but neither party will have a decisive vote. That means a market value will. Second, the deal does not divide Ukrainian land into occupied and not occupied territories, and where the investment fund will operate has not yet been discussed by the parties. This is huge, even so you don't see it that way. That means that wherever the fund operates in Ukraine, it is Ukrainian soil, de jure and de facto, and Americans can stand for it. So in general, what is very, very different from the first option proposed by the White House is that the previous aid to Ukraine was defined as a debt, and the fund would in fact be managed only by the United States. Now, it is not the case, and this is good. More and more European countries understand that stopping Russia only in Ukraine will be difficult, to put it mildly. So they need to be prepared for Moscow's imperialistic ambitions to be, this time, repelled across the continent, not like it did not happen with Hitler's hordes. Thus, the Telegraph publication managed to find out that the United Kingdom has secretly begun preparations to repel a potential Russian attack. The country has decided to update its defense plan. This takes into account the preparation of safety zones and bunkers, the development of an action plan during the first hours of war in particular, and the general defense doctrine to be changed. According to the publication, as of today, analysts believe that London is not well prepared to defend its critical infrastructure. Coalition has given political yes approval for the formation of a special tribunal for the Russian Federation. Along with that, the EU, Denmark, Italy and France have signed an agreement to allocate additional €1 billion for arms supplies to the Ukrainian forces immediately. The next step is a meeting of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe in Luxembourg, which will take place on May 13-14, 2025. It is so good to know that these funds will come from proceeds from frozen Russian assets in Europe, as reported by the Prime Minister of Ukraine. And Ambassador Kurt Volker commented on the circumstances under which the tribunal will be able to act effectively.
I think what's going to happen is you will have a strong body of evidence of the responsibility for war crimes committed by very senior Russians. And this needs to be thoroughly documented according to international standards. It needs to be made public. So the first thing you're fighting for is shaping the international understanding of what Russia did. Right. The next thing is whether Russia would agree to extradite those people to face justice, either in Ukraine or in an international tribunal. The answer to that is quite simply no. They're not going to do it, certainly not under a Putin regime or a regime that is like a Putin regime. Right. And if Russia has an internal change and they become a normal country, and we've never seen that, but if they did, even then there's such a nationalist sentiment in Russia, I'm skeptical that they would extradite people. So I think it's more important to set the record out there. And if there is ever an opportunity to bring individuals at a high level to justice, we should be ready for that. But I don't think we should have unrealistic expectations about the likelihood of that.
The EU will propose banning gas imports from Russia until the end of 2027. This was reported by Bloomberg. As noted by the European Commission, the refusal to buy Russian fuel that fuels this war will open the market to alternative suppliers, in particular the United States. In April, Gazprom's export via the only branch to Europe, the Turkish Stream gas pipeline, decreased. Kristina Dubrovska investigated more for you.
According to a preliminary plan, the European Commission will propose banning new gas agreements with Russia and spot contracts as early as 2025, Bloomberg reports. The measures also include a ban on importing Russian fuel, both pipeline gas and liquefied natural gas. The exact timeline will depend on how quickly the EU can arrange alternative LNG supplies from other countries, particularly the US, Qatar, Canada and African nations, according to the British news agency. Significant volumes from the US and Qatar are expected to become available starting in 2027.
The Commission will also aim to boost transparency over the origin of EU gas supplies, according to the People. One option would be to force companies to share key details on volumes and contract durations with national authorities and the Commission. From Bloomberg publication.
Once the file is ready, then we move ahead to adopting.
We will have to wait a bit more until the adoption of the roadmap, which will precisely provide answers to those questions in greater detail.
The plan includes obligations for countries most dependent on Russian energy, specifically Slovakia and Hungary.
In 2027, the EU wants to end any energy imports from the Russian Federation. Total nonsense. This will only lead to further high prices and a further reduction in the competitiveness of the capabilities of European industry.
At the same time, the European Commission emphasized that Slovakia and Hungary will be able to secure alternative sources of supply. European officials believe that phasing out Russian gas should not significantly impact prices or the EU's energy security. Analysts are confident that global LNG supply will increase in the coming years.
The EU is replacing Russian energy not only through diversification of supply, but also by investing in energy-saving and efficiency projects. In addition, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is being introduced, which limits the import of goods into the EU with a high carbon footprint. Another critical part of replacing Russian gas is the development of renewable energy sources, solar, wind, and bioenergy.
Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, EU countries have cut their imports of Russian gas from over 40% to 19%, equivalent to 23 billion euros, according to Bloomberg. Russia still supplies LNG from its fields to France, Belgium, and Germany via France, as well as to Spain. In December 2024, 10 EU countries, including Finland, Poland, and the Baltic states, urged the European Commission to ban Russian energy imports as soon as possible.
Gazprom is already in a catastrophic financial state, operating with huge losses, about 15 to 20 billion euros annually. If it loses another 40 billion euros, the damage could be irreparable. Gazprom would essentially be bankrupt, and the Russian state budget would have to prop it up just to keep it afloat. The alternative would be to drastically raise domestic gas prices in Russia to support Gazprom. There's no way for Gazprom to find a replacement for the European market, which remains the most economically attractive.
According to Reuters, with the shutdown of the Yamal Europe and Nord Stream pipelines and the closure of the Ukraine transit route starting January 2025, Gazprom is left with only one operational pipeline to Europe, Turkstream. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Kristina Dombrovskaya, UATV News.
Pro-Russian far-right leader Georgy Simeon won the first round of the presidential elections in Romania and will face pro-Western and pro-Ukrainian Bucharest Mayor Nikos Dan in the second round. Simeon said that if he wins the presidential election, he will provide a leadership position for the odious Călin Georgescu, who was previously banned from running. Well, populists are dangerous not only because they lie, but because they lie masterfully and demonstrate actually the agility and ability to unify with other parties, which I surely would love to see more in our democratic leaders these days. The far-right presidential candidate already dreams of uniting all of Romania and Moldova under his dear leadership, his and Russia, of course, as he is known for his close ties with Russian intelligence and anti-Ukrainian stance.
He created a paradigm, and that is that of a guru of a sect. So his rhetoric was very much a kind of social Christian mission, you know. It was not like an ordinary politician. So Simeon, who was not like that, he's actually a football fan hooligan. This is how they started, actually, from this environment. He is trying to borrow, you know, this image, this posture, this kind of rhetoric, apparently with some success so far. So this is what he will probably try to do even better for the second round.
Well, this is already his second attempt to hold presidential elections in Romania. The results of the first round, held last November, were annulled by the country's constitutional court on December 6th, 48 hours before the start of the second round. The country's authorities suspected candidate Călin Georgescu, who very unexpectedly, but not for Russia, really showed the best result in the first round, of manipulating votes on TikTok. Well, some say Russia may be behind this victory. I say no way it may be. It is. The results of the first round of the presidential elections were nevertheless annulled on the basis of facts of Russian interference. The Romanian authorities also accuse him of violating the constitutional order and sympathizing with fascism. Only that makes him a perfect Russian, is it not? And good news is a cherry on the top. Russian oil prices have fallen to a 4-year low, 40% below what the Russian budget was targeted at. According to Reuters, the average price of a blend of Russian rubles and ESPO crude fell to $48.92. Now, to maintain military spending, the Russian government will have to raise taxes and cut something really sensitive, like sensitive social spending, for example, if there are any left in Russia these days. Well, anyway, why the price of Russian oil is plummeting and what to expect in the short and long term, my colleagues have found out for you.
On May 5th, the price of Brent crude fell by nearly 4%, dipping below the $60 mark for the first time since 2021. Despite a brief stabilization, oil prices remain on the verge of a 4-year low.
Russia based its budget on an oil price of nearly $70 per barrel of Russian crude. Today, it is receiving just over $50. It is important to understand that this is not simply a proportional decrease, because production costs must be factored in. As of today, the production cost in Russia is $45 per barrel. They had expected to earn the margin between the market price and their production cost about $25. Now that margin has shrunk to just $7. That is a drop of nearly 4 times.
Among the causes of the price drop are the ongoing trade war between the United States and China and the decision by the OPEC Plus alliance, led by Saudi Arabia, to abandon its long-standing strategy of supporting oil prices. This has already impacted Russia's state budget.
The fall in the prices of energy, which account for a third of Russia's federal budget proceeds, prompted the government last week to hike the 2025 budget deficit estimate to 1.7% of gross domestic product from a 0.5% for 2025. The move came after it reduced the energy revenue forecast by 24% due to expectations of a prolonged period of low oil prices, from a Reuters report.
Due to its ongoing war against Ukraine, Russia has already increased national defense spending in 2025 by a quarter to 6.3% of GDP. This is the highest level in decades. Many analysts predict the Russian government will be left with no choice but to raise taxes and reduce certain social spending, unless it cuts military expenditures.
The oil price decline triggered by Saudi Arabia's actions is only beginning, and it brings no optimism. As has been warned, the most troubling scenario for any economy is stagflation. That is when economic contraction coincides with rising inflation, and you do not know which to tackle first. Inflation, which hits the poorest, or economic decline. That is when the most damaging effects begin to unfold, because whatever measures you take, the negative side effects outweigh the positive impact.
U.S. President Donald Trump stated that the fall in oil prices increases pressure on Russia and raises the chances of reaching an agreement to end the war in Ukraine.
If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. Donald Trump, President of the United States.
President of Poland. Andrzej Duda is urging Donald Trump to impose stricter sanctions on Russia to end the war. He also emphasized that the American leader, quote, can use various economic instruments to force Russia to respect certain actions.
Some of these means may be very radical, very harsh, I believe, especially various economic instruments, but I believe that President Donald Trump is capable of implementing them. Andrzej Duda, President of Poland, in an interview with Politico.
For its part, the European Commission intends to announce a complete ban on the import of both pipeline and liquefied natural gas from Russia, Bloomberg reports. This is expected to take effect by the end of 2027. Some restrictions may come into force as early as the end of this year. However, the final implementation timeline will depend on the EU's ability to secure alternative LNG supplies from other countries. Reported by Natalia Husak, Volodymyr Stenhelov, UATV News.
Well, that seems to be it for another week. I'm Henry Keane and we are UATV English. Thank you so very much for being with us and watching this episode. It helps us to debunk Russian propaganda. With Ukrainian truth, for all of our global sake, please comment, share and subscribe. Join us on this side of good. Stay safe and tune for more. Goodbye.